You guys check this out. Bank of Canada is going to explain its pandemic actions as political tides shift. The Bank of Canada is doing a formal review of its pandemic-era policies when it bought hundreds of billions of government bonds to suppress the interest rates. This could be the last chance that Governor Tim Macklem could explain himself before the Conservatives take power. Early next year, the Bank of Canada plans to release a report on the exceptional measures it took during the pandemic. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, who's leading Prime Minister Justin Trudeau by a hefty margin in polls, slammed the central bank during its first ever foray into quantitative easing, saying it contributed to inflation. During his 2022 campaign, he even threatened to fire Macklem. If Poilievre wins next year, that will put him in the country's highest office ahead of the scheduled review of the bank's mandate in 2026 and the end of Macklem's term in 2027. As the bank renews its framework, a conservative government would likely want to scrutinize tools such as quantitative easing. Before that happens, the central bank will conduct its own review, which will include an assessment by central banking experts. This assessment will deliver a verdict on what role bond buying played in the run-up in inflation, which peaked at 8.1% in June 2022. Deputy Governor Sharon Kozicki cited bank research that showed that quantitative easing added as much as 3% to the country's GDP. She also adds that emergency bond purchases added 1.8% points to inflation. The central bank's position is that supply disruptions and higher commodity prices were the primary contributors to inflation. The bank said quantitative easing was initially deployed to restore market functioning during the economic shock of the pandemic. It complemented the then-Governor Stephen Pelosi's decision to cut interest rates from 1.75% to 0.25%, injecting liquidity throughout the financial markets and helped to keep longer-term borrowing costs lower. Monetary policymakers under Tim Macklem continued large asset purchases well into the recovery. In total, the bank bought $340 billion in bonds, and at the peak in 2021, the central bank held as much as 43% of the Canadian government bonds on its balance sheet. In 2020, when Poilievre was a conservative finance critic, he accused the Bank of Canada of acting as the ATM for Trudeau's insatiable spending appetite. In 2020, Poilievre told supporters he planned to sack Macklem. What do you think? Do you think the Bank of Canada needs to explain itself during its pandemic actions?